This is Eagle Freedom Presents Showtime.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Here's your host, Destin Rogers.
What if the only walls keeping you from total freedom aren't made of brick and mortar, but are built entirely in your own mind? Welcome back to Eagle Freedom Presents, everybody. My name is Destin Rogers. On today's show, we're going to explore what it means to be truly free. And our guest today has turned that pursuit into a science. She is a pioneer in the field of quantum freedom, a globally recognized possibility coach, and a media powerhouse featured on media outlets including CNN, Fox, ABC, and NBC. And she was recently awarded the 2025 Global Woman Powerhouse Award. Congratulations on that. She was born in Ukraine under the restrictions of the Soviet Union, and she proved early on that boundaries are meant to be broken. She went on to become a top 1% real estate agent in the US during the 2009 market crash, and has a PhD in metaphysical studies, who has taken her message of empowerment quite literally to the stars. We'll talk about that, what that exactly means in the interview. And she is the founder of U2 Shine. She's a best-selling author of the Me book series, including Manifest Me, Miracle Me, Hear Me, Dream Me, and her newest book, Prosper Me, and a woman on a mission to help you ignite your own possibilities. Would you please welcome the creator of the Free Me method, Dr. Victoria Rader.
Oh, Destin, thank you. Are you available for eulogies?
Well, I guess.
I'd like to put that into my will when I'm selecting somebody.
I've never thought about that. I spent many years in radio broadcasting, and I think that's the first time somebody's asked me that question. So, oh, that is just amazing. But anyway, Victoria, it is an honor to have you. Your message in reading about you is so powerful and so moving about what it is you're trying to do for each individual that hears your message and hears what you've gone through. And so again, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you. It is really an honor to be here. Whenever there is freedom, I am naturally attracted to it. Isn't that fantastic that I learned the name of your podcast only after we've had a wonderful, warm introduction? And so, but there are no coincidences, just a lot of miracles. So let's let freedom ring, Destin. I'm ready. You ask.
All right.
And I'll bring it on.
Well, one of the things about our podcast and our mantra is rise, inspire, and overcome. And you've definitely done that through your journeys. So why don't we bring the audience up to speed? Tell us about Victoria growing up, because as I mentioned, you grew up in Ukraine when it was under control of the Soviet Union. So tell us about growing up there and what it was like.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I want to reframe for every person that is listening is that, in a hero journey, as it exists in our movies, in our books, and even in public speaking, it's like, I had a life of horror and terror, and then the light came in, and now I live happily after. And Dustin, I'm yet to meet one person for whom it's true. I have a lot of people who are selling that image, but the overcoming is a daily, daily, daily choice and daily decision. And so while I'll be sharing things as the hero journey, because there were significant things, but it's important for me to know that, for everybody to know, is that there isn't a happily ever after. That is the greatest lie. There is only happy now. No matter what your life is doing to you, make sure it's doing through you, and overcome it in this very moment. Whatever you're going through, you get to keep your inner freedom to say, the muck I'm marching through is the muck I'm marching through, but I'm still me. I'm an overcomer, because otherwise you rob yourself of a sense of being free and waiting to be free. And that's the danger of slavery. So anyway,
Wow.
that just had to come through, and I've shared it because, because every day there is something for each one of us to choose to be free towards. And so for me growing up in Ukraine, it was the point of perspective. I grew up in a home that was a loving home with two of my parents, but they did have to work. And so every summer I went to spend summers with my grandma and grandpa. And looking from a materialistic point of view, in absolute poverty, we did not have indoor plumbing. We had an outhouse. If I woke up 3 in the morning and as a 5-year-old wanted to go to the bathroom, that was a little bit of a hike. Through the field to get to the outhouse. I mean, them are strong legs I'm using in tennis today. So, but this is looking back, right? I can tell you that at that moment, as a child, because it was the norm, I did not feel the struggle. Like that would be misconstrued, I just was in the moment. I was just present to it. I think I really learned what overcoming by choice is for the first time when I was already in the US and found myself completely clashing with culture, completely not belonging, young mom with a tiny baby with zero money, zero skills, in such a um, difficult circumstance that I didn't have curtains on my windows and just sobbing there in postpartum. I think that was probably the first point of aware overcoming.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your parents, if I remember, they were both journalists. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. There's a great
You,
story there. Destin, my dad, so 1986, Chernobyl happens in April, and that is when the nuclear plant blows up. And he was the editor-in-chief for the major newspaper in Ukraine, a regional newspaper. And so he was sent to Chernobyl to the nuclear site disaster 2 days after it happened. And he was mandated to write an article how all was well. So my dad goes there, comes back, pukes for weeks with minor radiation poisoning. Gratefully, we still have him today because it was minor. And he refuses to write that article. And he immediately is demoted from being the regional editor-in-chief to covering just the sports. And it was fascinating to see because what it meant for our family, we go from a socially recognized status of journalists with influence, where they knew the president, they knew the party, ministers, to just being really demoted socially. And I was watching it like I'm an 11-year-old kid watching my dad standing for something. That amazing thing happens when the Soviet Union falls apart. They are pulling a bunch of authentic journalists who stood in their integrity and send them to US for the first exchange of a free press. Because in the Soviet Union, press, as everything else, as every entrepreneurial endeavor, belonged to the government. So there were two major newspapers in the Soviet Union. One was called Truth and one was called News. And the joke was that the truth had no news and the news had no truth. I mean, so that was a journalism in the Soviet Union. So my dad goes to the US and comes back and becomes the first, the Ukraine becomes independent. He becomes the first private owner of the first free newspaper in Ukraine. Like it was just an
wow.
incredible journey of integrity, to see how it happens.
That what's interesting about that story is what happened with your father and him doing that wouldn't have happened had he had not originally just stood up for the integrity that he had because he did not want to report something that wasn't accurate. Is that where you started, maybe got into integrity yourself, is watching your parents, watching how your dad said, look, I can't report on something like that because it's not true.
You know, that question actually takes me even deeper into that story as an answer because the making of who I am and my mission began with the one question I asked Dad. I don't know that I analyzed the significance of his honesty at that age yet, but when he did come back, I've asked him, I'm a kid, he's bringing M&Ms for the first time, never seen or touched M&Ms, and this is like, wow, now I understand what high quality junk it is, but back in the Soviet Union, it's like, wow. So, but I asked him a question. I said, because he had so many impressions and he was sharing so much. And I said, Dad, if there was one thing that impacted you the most, what was that? And he said, and it's very emotional for me right now because I'm making the parallel right now. Ukraine is in the war, right, at the time of recording of this. And he said, in former Soviet Union, we have all of these tombs of the unknown soldiers from the World War II. And he said they're all marked as there lie the unknown soldiers. And he said, when I stood at the Arlington Cemetery by the tomb of the unknown soldier, on it said, there lie those whose names are known, if only unto God. And he said, I understood what freedom is. Freedom is you are known, if only to divine creator, if only to the force that created you, if only to God. And complete totalitarianism is you are nobody. You're unknown. You're dispensable. That moment, I believe, Destin, is something that woken in me this ancient genetic soul knowing that yes, we're all known. And if we forget it, we want to be recognized and we live from an ego and we're lost. And if we remember that we're known, we ask ourselves, what I'm known for? What are my talents to serve this humanity? And we live a thriving, free life.
Oh, that's amazing. So how did you, being in the Soviet Union and then of course coming to the States, at what point did you really realize that you were meant for a change? You were meant to do something different with your life and affecting others. Because yeah, I would imagine that, not being in the Soviet Union, not understanding, not really being in that, but understanding the fact that it's more controlled environment. Where did you pivot to a point where you really wanted to do more and be free more and experience what it was like not being in that kind of a situation?
I think there were two moments. One, I wanted to homeschool my kids so they would learn to speak both Russian and Ukrainian, along with English. And I started homeschooling them, and I thought it was a fabulous idea to take them to Greece at ages 7 and 4 for 3 weeks to learn, the Greek culture. And when I came home, my wonderful husband sat me down and said, honey, do you know this little plastic thing you've been swiping? It has no money attached to it. And there was no credit in the former Soviet Union. If you either had money or you didn't, you could have dreams. And so he says, you put us in debt. And in 2007, shortly after the trip, I sit down and I go to all-knowing Google and I ask, what is the fastest way to make money in America while homeschooling your kids? And this is 2007. The market is hot in real estate, and this is how I get in real estate. I get in real estate as a way to find homeschooling. Now, what you wouldn't be able to tell from me is that I was naturally incredibly shy. Talking to strangers was just the insane amount of sacrifice. And so to make a long story short is my why of supporting my kids and seeing the world pulled me into doing whatever it takes, but within my model of operation, within my integrity to thrive and being able to thrive while being a full homeschooling mom, while never working on Sunday in real estate, becoming one top agent, then people wanted to know my secret sauce. And I had to sit down and say, what is the secret sauce? And this is when I realized is that A, it was that yearning for freedom, in that point for freedom of travel with them. And B is that understanding that I really believed that everything was possible here because nothing was back home. It was a gift. So that was a really big shift. And so then 2013 came as the second point when I have this thriving real estate career. But starting in February, well, first of all, the United States government notices that I'm thriving and puts me into the audit in January. So then that was the January of 2013. And then February, we got a very devastating call that my mom's sister in Moldova died completely unexpectedly. And then every month, Destin, every single month, I lost somebody in my family or a very close friend for completely unrelated reasons. And it was after third or fourth death when my cousin drowned, who I grew up with as my brother, really, we're only 2 years apart, and grew up at my grandma's house. When he drowned, and when I sat there completely numb through grief, but also with absolute knowing that he was at peace. And this whole new realm opened up spiritually. This whole new understanding opened up for me, and I couldn't do things the old way anymore. This is when I went in to study the quantum field, the laws of the quantum field, and the spirituality, because to me, they're echoing each other. And so by the end of 2013, I lost 11 people, but my company, You to Shine, was born, and I walked away from the broker with millions in sales pending because now that was the new point of freedom.
Yes. So, and I've talked to others before who have kind of gone similar to, they've walked away from something that was secure. I mean, you were the top 1%. You were living a life that even many Americans weren't able to live, and made the decision to walk away from that because you found something more of a, I guess, more of a true calling that you were meant to do something else. Correct?
Well, that would be only 50% true. That would be in a romantic hero journey where the hero blazes through the skies in a cape. That was true. But also, what was even more true is that I've learned to distinguish between two voices internally. The intuition or the spirit or the voice, I call it the sacred self. And I knew the price of not listening to that voice, having ignored the prompting to do something enough times that it came at a very high ticket, some of it financially high, some of it emotionally high. When that voice internally said, it's time, I followed it because I've learned that the price of not following the prompting or the intuition, call it whatever you would, the voice of the spirit, is just too high, and that I'm not prepared to pay a higher price. I can pay a price of temporary losing income but and I think it works for all of us. I think all of us have enough of these misalignments that when it really matters, we have experienced ignoring it enough times that to the outer world, it looks like we take this courageous step, you know? So just being real.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because doing something like that, it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of courage to make that pivot. And how many times each of us have had those opportunities in life that something comes along where it's telling us to do something, but we ignore it. We push it aside. That's not for me. That's not that can't be what I'm meant to do. And we ignore that message. But you took that message and you moved with it and you created your company. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so in 2013, I've started the company first as a business coaching, but incorporating the blocks to thriving in business that are deep subconscious blocks. Because one thing I learned is that there were agents that were outworking me. There were agents that were smarter. There were agents that had more experience. And so I started asking a question, why are they not receiving the same results that I'm receiving? And it came down to inner programming, right? The discipline can take you only so far. The discipline will not outperform your self-perception. And so that self-perception of your own worth, and that self-perception of your own worth is coded deeply by our subconscious mind. And so this is when I've studied any modality from neurolinguistic programming to hypnosis to theta healing to EFT, anything that could shift the subconscious programming. Then we developed a lot of our techniques. Here's a cool story about listening to that voice. In December 2019, I already had a beautiful studio, thriving studio, had a lot of programs on anything from how to make couples relationship work to how to manifest anything. And that same voice came in and said, take everything online. And when I said, okay, I'll take everything online, now what will the subscription be called? And then that's when the name Quantum Freedom was born. And I didn't quite understand fully what it was. So I started a subscription, Quantum Freedom. We launched it on January 2020, a month before the lockdowns began, a month before we started learning about COVID. We were completely transitioned as a business, and got to support so many other entrepreneurs and coaches through their journeys, now being an online program.
And when you made that switch, isn't it true that you still didn't know exactly what it was you were going to do? You just said, here it is. And you went out to your community and said, do you want to join this?
Yeah.
What was the response on that from your community?
Mixed.
What are you
You know,
doing?
well, people are like, well, you have this beautiful office. Are you not going to do trainings? And here's what I believe is when you don't know, the best answer is I don't know. Just own that, and I would say I have no idea. I have no idea what this year holds for us, but I'm guided to take it online. What it gave us for us is an immediate expansion globally and bringing people from other countries into community. And I think that trade-off for the local community was gorgeous because all of a sudden they were doing the same programs from people from Thailand and China and India and Finland, and it created a very interesting global benefit almost immediately.
Going back a little bit when we were talking about, internally, we battle with ourselves internally all the time, right? And I say this, and I think I've heard you talk about this prison that we live in. It's not the really the physical cell, but it's the prison that we live within ourselves. It's like a tragedy happens or we go through something and it's another bar on the wall and it's another ball. The next thing you know, we're going from a room that's full of that's open to now having a room that's locked us in because we put these bars up ourselves. Can you touch on that and how people can deal with putting these bars up on their life and building their own prison and maybe they don't even realize that they're doing
So I think the very first thing to say, as the most powerful phrase you can tell yourself, to say, this is normal and I'm normal. That's the very basics of beginning of all healing. Because that very voice that keeps you a prisoner is also the voice that says something is wrong with you and everybody else has it easier than you. And that is the greatest lie that there is. So a client of mine, actually, Stephanie Cruz, have her permission, isn't that cool, to share this story, came to me years ago and she said, I'm just messed up about this whole commitment thing. I'm either overcommitting or I'm afraid to be committed. How do I commit better? And it was interesting because the answer that came through became an answer to your question about, being in prison or not, is that I told her, listen, we're incredibly committed at all times. The question is, which of the two voices we're committed to? Is it the scared me or sacred me? Because they're always present. It's a myth that one of them disappears. They're always present. If you're human, you're going to hear both. Now, if your scared voice is so loud that it is screaming, you might not hear the quiet, sacred voice, but it is there. So it's so important for all of us to know that and when you look at scared and sacred, they're the same letters out of order. And I say the only letter out that moves is the C of commitment. So today, right now, you're going to make a choice. You'll know your scared voice very well. Like the voice that discourages you, disempowers you, and tells you why you can't with a long list. You can thank it and say, it's normal that you're there. You're trying to keep me safe. You're trying to keep me alive. I am both. And now I'm making a decision and a choice. I'm going to quiet down and I'm going to wait until I hear the still small voice. What would you like me to do about this? Very powerful if you've never done it.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. You talk about your guidance to reclaim freedom through your surrender to love. Explain love because we were talking, oh, love, but there's something behind love, the way you explain it.
Well, first thing people will say, we even sing in song, "Oh, love hurts," and I'm like, no, losing love hurts.
Wow, yeah, true.
Tell us the whole story.
Right?
You know, but I'm not talking about romantic human love because romantic human love is an emotion that is conditional. I'm talking about love as an acronym for life, originating, vibrant emotion or energy in motion. Whether you think of it as quantum field or you think of it as God, great overall designer, God is love, field is love. It is the energy that originates life. So when I simplify love to that, think of how easy it is. If it adds to life, it's love. And if it doesn't, it ain't. It's that simple. And so when a parent is screaming at the child saying, I love you, is it shrinking the child's life or expanding it? Like, so we can measure love in that way. But really, love in that content is, and this is where I love talking about it, right? Because under the frequency of our matter, of our physical body, we're all vibrating energy. I mean, it's just people are like, well, it's woo. I'm like, no, honey, it's quantum mechanics. It ain't woo. You and I are electrons, atoms, and protons. I mean, it's just who we are. And so we're all part of the field. It's very fascinating for us to think that in the conversation that you and I are having, the conversation you and I started and half hour whenever we finish, we are not the same people, not only emotionally because of the exchange of information and energy, but physically. The trillions of our cells are no longer there, and trillions new cells are born. And so life is continually continuing through. And the energy that creates all of life is that love. So when I say surrender, I will talk for 30 seconds about that. So the joke is that I'm Ukrainian, we don't surrender. Well, ha ha ha, you can watch the news. I mean, it really is do or die. And so I remember there was this one teaching about, well, submitting or surrendering. And I really struggled with this. How do you submit? How do you surrender? And was pondering, meditating on it. And I was I was sitting on the bench, and God's like, lift feet off the bench. I'm like, that's strange, but I'm already weird. So, why would I stop now?
Why
So I
not?
lift my feet, I lift my feet off the floor. And there's this deep knowing you're now surrendering your weight to the bench.
Mm.
Only in complete surrender you can receive complete support. And so when I say surrender to love, I'm inviting us to allow and invite complete support that is both seen and unseen around us. Because that little scared voice will want us to believe that we're all alone. One of the greatest lies it has is no one cares. You're insignificant. You're not enough. You can't have what you want. And you're so different that you don't belong anywhere. That's all small voice. Yeah.
Wow. Do you think sometimes people, even though it's a scared feeling, that people use that as a safety mechanism? Like, I can't do that because I'm scared, so I'm not going to go beyond. I'm not going to go beyond something, so I'm going to stay safe. Even though I'm scared, I'm going to stay safe.
Yeah, they're one and the same. The fear is the fear for our safety. They're actually one and the same. There is no fear if we were not seeking safety. So if you say, I'm afraid, you're always fearing for your safety or for someone else's safety. So they're really one and the same. And that safety mechanism is built into our genetics as a survival mechanism. And you cannot thrive in survival.
You talked about energy and motion, and Bob Proctor was a big opponent of advocate of energy. There's always energy in it, but whether you're sitting, it doesn't matter what it is. The bench you were sitting on, there's energy. Did you learn a lot of that also through Bob Proctor and learning about the energy levels that he talks about?
Yeah, Bob was my first mentor and really, really a dear friend. And um, I've already studied energy and came to Bob as a master in the field. One of the things that Bob gave me that hopefully benefits somebody today, he said, go where you want it, not just where you need it. I think for a lot of people, our potential is shrunk because I call it, we're trying to save the dead fish. I mean, that was very much me. It was trying to force life, encouragement, or momentum to a person, place, or thing that chose not to have it. I think the greatest point of freedom is allowing others to be free to not be free.
Mhm.
And when you honor that, and instead you're focusing on what you can do and surround yourself with people, then they can follow you in greater safety to them. Because usually, what we want the most for those we love the most, we force the most. And you cannot have freedom with force. And when we force it on somebody, we lose our own freedom because we're taking it away from others. And it is so insidious and subconscious.
And that and the fact that freedom to me is different than freedom to you and freedom to the next person. Everybody's got their own version of what freedom means. Some think it's financial freedom. Some think it's just freedom from everyday stress or a bad relationship. So the freedom part of it is different for everybody. You've had clients from all levels, celebrities on over. Do you find a common thread in there that everybody feels when they're talking to you? Is there something common in there?
Yeah, it's always different levels of disconnect from your own worth. Some of the people that appear most successful are so terrified that they lost who they are to their success, and some of them forget who they are without their success. So much so that we know that when some of them lose it, they attempt to take their own lives because they don't no longer know who they are. In spiritual circles, it's very interesting. It's the same token of detachment from your worth. It is saying if I allow for financial abundance, then I am becoming a greedy or corrupt person. And I always say, well, but you don't have to. There's a choice of you don't have to, just as an option. But I think the one common denominator is always, am I truly worthy? Am I truly worthy?
Do you find a lot of them ask the question, am I truly living what I'm supposed to, am I truly doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Think for example, let's say let's say somebody's going through, we'll just uh, a domestic violence situation or something like that, where they've been beat down, where they don't have any self worth, right? They literally think, I do not have any self worth. Reality is they do, but they just don't know it because they've been beat down so much. Can you address something like that? And somebody who's actually feeling that kind of self worth?
It's interesting for two reasons. I literally just got back from Be Great event. It's a philanthropy awards event where I spoke and did quite a few panels for the event, and where Brian Gallinger, who's the founder of Be Great, honored a few nonprofits that are actually working against human trafficking and against abuse. And it was very interesting for me to understand is that we don't have what comes after. So even if a person, the first step is always awareness. The first point is for a person to be aware that what is happening to them is not okay. Because some of the victims of severe abuse do not have that awareness. They really don't. They were beaten as kids, went to be beaten as teenagers, and now they're beaten as adults. They really have no awareness. And it's a scary thing to think, but it does exist. But when the awareness comes, then they can start building their worth. But where do they go to? As an abused, let's say, as an abused person, especially if you are financially dependent, and very often people that are beaten are financially dependent on their partner or do not know how to make it financially free on their own. So they don't know how, they don't know where to go. So it's the lack, first, it's a lack of awareness of situation, then it's a lack of practical solution. Because honestly, restoring the depth of the worth of the soul comes much more natural when a soul is extracted from that situation and has their survival needs met. And so there are a lot of programs that I support and do a lot of pro bono worth work for that actually take victims out of those situations. Um, for the Brisa Foundation that works all over the world with children of sexual abuse, we have donated our Worthy Me journal as a completely free journal to restore the worth for those kids. So yeah, it's it's
Do you
a it's a
feel
huge problem.
Yeah. Do you feel that for somebody who's gone through those circumstances or going through it right now, who've experienced all that, kind of jumping into, I call it the Me series that you've launched into, walk them through how something like that through the Me series can help them move on past and get into the life that they really are meant to be living and not living where they've been.
So the very first step is a very powerful truth. And I can't think of anything of a greater reframe, and that goes for both a person who was harmed and for a person who did the harming and is committing to no longer do that. When something happens to us, we tend to affirm internally, I'm unworthy because of that. So whatever happened to me or something that I did, now I'm unworthy. So the reframe is what happened to me, what was done by me, was unworthy of me.
Mm.
It is a huge reframe and it shifts energy literally instantaneously. When you say, yes, these things happened, they were unworthy of me. They they cannot touch my inner worth. They were unworthy of me. So that's the first step, is reframing that. The second step will be work of forgiveness. Forgiving whatever happened, not absolving. A lot of people cannot forgive and move forward because they think forgiveness is absolution. No, I love English language because forgiving is for giving. It's for giving away what was unworthy of you. Let heaven, let universe deal with it. Let God deal with it. And that gives space for healing, for freedom, and for hope. So the way it is done, there is a part of us that's deeply subconscious that cannot let go unless it's asked for forgiveness. So you write a letter to you as if from a person who hurt you repeatedly. And it's very simplified formula and it works miracles. So first you say, what happened was unworthy of me. And then you write a letter to yourself that'll say, with your name, Dear Destin, please forgive me for not being able to ask you for forgiveness. Because maybe a person is dead or maybe they're unwilling. So their first is, forgive me for not being able to ask you for forgiveness. The next line, what happened to you should have never happened. It was wrong. You didn't deserve it. Please, please forgive me. That's simple. That's simple. So you write that letter, and yes, your conscious knows that you wrote it, but then you read it. And when you read it, it penetrates your subconscious, which have never heard or was asked to truly forgive. And then you get to say, I choose to forgive. It's very powerful, practical release.
Sounds like it's for those that do take that step and they go through this process, that it can be a very emotional process as they're doing that. And maybe that's something that needs to happen, right? That emotion needs to come out so you can, relieve your body of that. And again, we're going back to the whole energy thing, right? You're leaving that negative energy that's been stuck down in your body. And so if somebody is going through that, because they're going to be scared, they're going to be scared to even write that down. They're like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I, like you mentioned, I don't know if I can forgive for what has happened to me. Can you touch on the emotional part and how they can deal with that part? Because that's a big part of the whole process, the emotion.
I think this is where surrender to love principle comes even higher, because you get to forgive yourself for not being able to forgive, and then ask your higher power to forgive through you and for you. And that is where you surrender to that higher love. It's a very beautiful process, you know. It's having a couple of my family members brutally slaughtered in the war and doing the work that I do. I did have to forgive the people that slaughtered them because otherwise it would completely suck me in. And once again, to forgive is not to absolve,
Mhm.
but to understanding. I don't know why it's coming through, but I'll share. You know, we are addicted to understanding. Sometimes we can't forgive or we can't act because we don't understand. And so until I understand, I won't forgive. Until I understand, I won't move forward. I won't act. That's why we don't hear that inner voice. But once again, in English language, if you think about the word understanding, you're standing under something. So you can only understand by standing below it. So when people say, I don't understand how somebody can do this horrible thing, I say, congratulations. Your frequency, your thoughts are higher than that. You will never understand it. You will never be below it. And for those things we definitely cannot understand, we have to forgive. And we have to forgive our lack of understanding. You want to understand the mind of God? You want to understand how the quantum field works? You want to understand how to create $1 billion empire so no children are hungry? Understand that instead.
Well, that's amazing. But that might be difficult for some people because they want to understand it. But they spend so much time. I say they, but we've all been in those
Yeah.
same situations where we want to understand why we want to get to that. And we spend so much time, so much energy on that part of it that we're not able to focus that energy towards a more positive outlook or reframing on what they've gone through or we've gone through in our lives. Can you touch a little bit more about that? That somebody out there might be just going, but I have to understand why is this?
Yeah, I think it's one of the greatest addiction. We're the highest addictive society that has ever existed, myself included, right? With my cell phone. I wonder what would happen to me if I didn't have my cell phone for 3 weeks. Maybe I'll do that as a social experiment. So when
All
I
right.
say we, I really do mean we, right? It's just the list of things we're addicted to is continually growing, you know? Some of us are addicted to checking Instagram sporadically, gaming, and I don't even touch substances. We are at the highest addiction level. And so that level of addiction is now, I need to understand. And I will just can only invite that only you make a decision and a choice what you are to understand. And if you want to understand things that are lower than the life you want to create, your understanding actually keeps you at a level of that lower life. Whatever you seek to understand, you are currently creating. So if you want to understand the mindset that harmed, hurt, or is demolishing the society, you are now on that team. You are now on that energy. And most likely you won't understand it until you go all the way below. Just 3 days ago, I met a young man. His name is Mark, and he did a phenomenal 11-minute movie. Don't remember the name of the movie. Haven't watched it yet. Just talked to him about it recently. But it is a movie, a documentary on him being incredibly bullied as a kid. And because he was bullied as a kid, how he was considering after he was looking for help for years and got no help, he had this thought, I'm just going to go shoot everybody in school.
Mm.
And then, with a higher awareness, understanding that was not a solution, but he very vulnerably shares that. And then he took me on a journey of, he said, do you understand that those who went and shot other kids in Colombia, that shooting, that we see an image of them? And he was not justifying the horrific choice they made, right? This is very important. But he was the one who understood them and he tracked down their history and he found out that they were severely bullied and raped over and over and over again. And they were seeking help from school and from administration and received none for years before the shooting. So here is a dark point of understanding that I just gained, not seeking it. See, I am seeking how do I support those that want to change the world for the better? How do I understand their platform to empower them? But because that is my level of understanding, this young man comes into my life and shares this story with me and his documentary. And he's now starting the empowering anti-bullying campaign because he actually understood it, because he stood in the depth of abuse. And his coping mechanism actually was, I'm going to hurt you back. I'm going to kill you all. And yet, when he heard his mind say that, he had a higher understanding to know that that was not a long-term solution, which a lot of those people are in a mental state that they're so detached and dissociated. They actually feel that that is a solution. It's
Wow,
horrific, horrific to look at that. But
that's an
that's a fact.
amazing story about how try to of understanding that going above that too about really digging into that. You've written several books. They're best-selling books. Was that ever a plan, or did that just come to you and decide I need to put this down in words? How did the book part of this come into play?
The very first book I wrote, I was still in real estate, and it was an answer to people were constantly asking, how do you do that you do? And it was called Until You Win. It was just practical principles of success. It was just literally a survival mechanism of saying this is how you do it, because I mean, it became a bestseller from sheer going like, this is you. And, but then the later books came in because I realized that knowing and doing are not the same thing. And there is a huge gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. But every single product that we have created has been guided, has had a divine guidance or inspiration. And it's interesting we're having this conversation because for over 2 decades, for a decade at a very highly paid level, I've done one-on-one coaching in addition to speaking and training. And it was just 2 days ago that I woke up to this clear knowing that in 2026 I will discontinue that. And right now I'm going through a very uncomfortable conversations with some of my clients that have been clients for 10 plus years, saying that we will find different ways to continue to serve you. And as I'm doing that, immediately the new program came in, which is we want to create a certification for quantum personal development coaching that our coaches are using, and that is so palpably different and more efficient and effective. And so freeing myself from working in the business will allow them to create yet a new program. And so it's always been one tiny step at a time and not knowing what comes next. I know that a lot of people plan ahead. I plan for today, and my plan is I'm going to show up to divine revelation fully and completely, and I'm going to follow it no matter what. So,
It's interesting you say that because in order, the way you describe that you're going to phase that you're going into a new part, it's being uncomfortable in order to grow in the process. And I think a lot of people, they don't want to become uncomfortable. They don't, they're scared of, we go back to the scared thing, but they don't want to become uncomfortable. But yet when you break out of that uncomfortable position, that's where the real growth really starts to happen. Can you touch on that a little bit?
well, I think, the word comfortable is a really cool word because fort comes from Latin. We know what fort is. It's a place that you're fully protected and you're safe inside the fort. So comfort means within the fort. And effort means outside of fort. Really, that's what it is. So when you take an effort, any effort outside the fort is already outside of comfort. And I say that the truth is that where my comfort zone stops, divine comfort zone begins. And that is where I get to surrender into some much greater support. That concept of faith, for Napoleon Hill, he talks of the concept of faith as the first concept. You just can't eradicate it. Like it's just there. It is a mandatory step. But there's a big difference coming out of comfort and being uncomfortable, but you don't need to be not comforted. They're two very different things. You can allow yourself to be continually comforted. And if you're not a person of faith or spirituality, you can comfort yourself. You can write your own affirmations where you will speak yourself into encouragement. Now, I truly believe that when you're comforted by divine power, it is a much more powerful experience. When you allow yourself to be comforted by the spirit that created you, by God that created you, then you're no longer attached to being comfortable because you're choosing to be comforted. And it's amazing because when you make that first step in blind faith, or even second or third, all of a sudden a step appears. And when that first step or support appears, your faith goes higher. And then you can take the next one and the next one. But you are in charge of taking those steps. And no amount of motivation can substitute a person's desire and decision.
You've done a lot of things with your life. You've done many incredible things since Ukraine and all of this, and you've had the opportunity. As I mentioned when we first started this in the introduction, we talked about space, about stars, and
Yep.
all of that. Some people are going, okay, what exactly are you talking about? Touch on that because I think that's a pretty interesting story.
Well, so I was invited to be a part of a great book. It's by Greg Reed. It's called Personal Development Book. It's kind of, Greg's done 150 books, and this was his last book. And I was quoted in that book as the founder of Quantum Personal Development, and we started exchanging a lot of information, this and that and the other. And then he said, look, you look at legacy so differently. You look at legacy as do your best today, and then whatever's left is irrelevant because you've done your best today, and yet you're leaving legacy behind. And so he says, would you mind being interviewed about legacy? And I said, sure. And so Greg's ghostwriter interviewed me about human legacy, what it means and what it means to humanity. What does really ego-free legacy do for humanity? Like when you look at the Notre Dame, do we know who put the first stone? And yet the legacy is eternal, right? When ego checks out, legacy expands. It's just a phenomenal thing. And so I was interviewed for that, and he says, well, guess what? I have a surprise for you. We are putting a lunar legacy, which is a little gold pyramid that has different moments of legacy of humanity, some inventions, some coded on it as a micro chip information, and we're doing a lunar legacy book that will be microchipped on it from people that are leaving legacy behind, so that if the earth comes to an end and somebody generations from now discovers this pyramid on the moon, they will have the best of the legacy. And so I became a part of the lunar legacy book that was encoded into that little pyramid. And in March last year, that pyramid was launched and placed on the moon. So I can literally say my words have flown to the moon.
I was going to say, your career's really taken off. It's really doing good, but it's really taken off when it gets into space. I mean, it's there forever. you
Fly
know,
me to the moon, baby.
right? Exactly. Exactly. Real quick, I want to touch on something. You are part of Zero Limit. It's a new movie that just came out. Tell us about your participation in that, how that all came about. I think it's a very interesting movie.
Well, the story behind that is that Jack Canfield, who of course is the incredible human being, read my Prosper Me book and interviewed me. And then when he interviewed me about Prosper Me book and he endorsed my book, Joe Vitale saw the interview and then asked me to come on his TV show. And we really hit it off during the TV show. And he invited me to be in his Zero Limits movie when he heard the story. In a Zero Limits movie, it is a movie that mostly focuses on one of the energy modalities that is called Ho'oponopono, which is returning to zero, which is the point of origination of all possibility. You're clearing any limitation through Ho'oponopono to restore the true zero and then expand from it into any possibility. And I made it to the movie. It was kind of cool. They filmed for 2 full days, and then the 3 minutes made it in from the 2 full days. So, and the 3 minutes that made in is probably the most significant to me because it's a story of my nephew who was born with 5 heart conditions, and it's a miraculous story of his healing through different modalities and through faith to where he is now turning 9 this month and is completely healthy with zero sign of ever having any of those severe conditions. So that's just a miraculous, miraculous zero limits story.
And it's an amazing movie too. For those, we'll make sure to include the link into that as well. But the whole movie on Zero Limits, the discussions, the interviews, really people should sit down and really listen because it really touches a lot of different aspects when it comes down to belief and how you feel.
And you know what else, Destin, that people won't hear? Their binaural beats that are aligned with each speaker that you can't hear, but that they're there. And so the movie is actually also healing. The movie itself is a healing process.
Touch on that real quick. Some people may not understand what it is you just said.
Yeah, so our ears are very limited. Our eyes are very limited. We see very small range of light, and our ears are even more limited than our eyes. We hear very limited range. But just because we don't hear it consciously doesn't mean it doesn't penetrate into our body subconsciously. And so binaural beats are the beats that we might not hear with our physical ear, But when they penetrate into the cells of our bodies, they're aligning our cells for the optimal health. And so that's what the movie carries with it, in addition to the regular soundtrack.
Wow. It's amazing. See, I knew as soon as we got you on here, people were going to learn something amazing about you along this journey. We've touched on so much here. What are steps that people can do to take to get in contact with you? Because I know you've got several different websites, different aspects that they can reach out to you. So let's touch on that. How can they connect with you and move further with you?
I think the simplest way to go is to go to our company site, which is you2shine.com, shine.com, because you can find both the free offers of that we have there, and you can book the time with me to learn about quantum freedom. If you wanted to learn more about that, you could also look at our apps there. But what I wanted to offer us today is from my app, I wanted to go to subcategory of my grief. For some reason, it feels very strongly because what you've been talking all the time about, the fear, I also think and feel that a lot of us have a lot of unprocessed grief, and grief that is unprocessed will act as fear and is the highest block to manifesting or creating a life that you desire. It actually, fear is secondary to the unprocessed grief. And so the app is built intuitively. So I'm going to just click on my grief and then shake the phone, and we're going to see what it picks for us. And I'll just take us through a 3-second visualization for that. Oh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? That's probably somebody listening right now. The feeling is feeling like you're in a vortex. So you first validate. You're not affirming, you're validating what is. I feel lost and pulled into a swirling vortex of thoughts and emotions. Once you validated what you're releasing, I'm going to ask you to visualize with your eyes closed, acknowledge the swirling feeling inside, and then imagine a calm, peaceful light descending from above and bringing a warm, comforting feeling. See how things settle and become still. And now affirm with your hand on your heart, I now feel a still, peaceful energy surround and comfort me. All is peaceful. I am hopeful. I am me. Isn't that interesting that the one we picked had to do with comfort?
That's
So yeah.
amazing. Well,
So
we've
that
touched
that
on a
app,
lot. Yeah, tell them about getting. You can get that app through the website.
you can get everything through the website, but that app is probably the most affordable point of freedom that somebody can get immediately on their journey.
Wow. All right. Well, like I said, we've touched on a lot of topics here. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want the audience to know about you, about You Two Shine, about me series? Anything that we may have missed during the course of our interview?
I think I want them to know something about themselves. So I'm going to finish on this little tiny note that I often say and always feel with great, great emotion because it is probably my greatest message. And that is, if this all-knowing universe had a better way to fill the time-space continuum that you currently occupy, if there was a better way for it to do anything but you, it would have done so. And yet it has not. So where you are and who you are is the very best God or universe has got right now. And that is more than enough to start where you are.
That's amazing. Well, Dr. Victoria Rader, we want to thank you very much for spending time with us, sharing your experiences with us, and hopefully somebody out there, as you mentioned, just took some of what you just said and now they're taking that to heart and wanting to learn more about what they can do to change their lives, because you've offered so much wisdom and insight, not only to the external, but to the internal, where everything's at. It's internally. And we want to thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me, Destin.
All right. And again, we want to thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Ego Freedom Presents. And remember, as always, you too can rise, inspire, and overcome.
To learn more about our mission and become a part of #Rio Movement, visit eaglefreedompresents.com. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs a beacon of hope. If you know someone who has an amazing story of overcoming, send us an email to eaglefreedompresents@gmail.com. And remember our mantra: rise, inspire, overcome. Podcast distribution for Eagle Freedom Presents provided by Podetize. Visit podetize.com for all your podcast needs.